We're catching up with Peter Treloar on the Eyre Peninsula. Peter, we used to talk to you a lot as the former member for Flinders. You've been very busy post-politics. Tell us first of all about your new role on the Landscape Board there.
Yeah, so very pleased to have been appointed as presiding member for the Landscape SA Board here on the Eyre Peninsula. There's a couple of other new members and some current members continuing on. So, and of course I know them all already, so looking forward to that opportunity and challenge.
And when it comes to the Landscape Board history, and you're on it now as the presiding member, you've had a period away, but you were involved back in the NRM days, I believe.
That's very true, Ricky. I was part of the inaugural Eyre Peninsula NRM board, as it was then, which was first formed in 2005, as NRM boards were right across the state. So served a 3-year term on the board at that stage, and it was very hands-on and all about setting up the board from scratch, really. So in a way, I feel like I'm getting back to my roots, which is kind of nice.
And looking back on the history on it, excuse the pun, the landscape has changed in terms of just how we describe it now, from natural resources management to the Landscape Board. What is the balance there in terms of, perspectives on the environment, farmers, etc.?
Well, it's finding that balance, isn't it, always? And I mean, the largest group of land managers in our region and probably across the state are the farmers and the landowners themselves. So obviously they need to be represented. And I'm one of them now, Ricky, again. Having spent 30 years active farming prior to entering state parliament, I'm back on the farm now, so enjoying that. But it's about finding the balance between production and sustainable production, I guess, and preserving the natural environment.
And these things aren't always mutually exclusive in the sense you look at one of the topics the board's been on about, seeps and even, rabbit and other pest control. These things are mutually beneficial for farmers and the environment if they're addressed well through the board.
Yeah, and I'm very strongly of the view that if a business is sustainable environmentally, or a farming business, let's say, if it's sustainable environmentally, then it's also sustainable financially as well. The two go hand in hand, they're intertwined, interlinked, and critical to each other. And
is there some testament to that? As a farmer yourself, you would have been seeing all the movement of freight during this cropping season. Is there some testament to that with how well the cropping season's gone in recent years on the Eyre Peninsula?
Well, certainly farming systems have changed over my farming career, and they'll continue to change. No system is perfect. But the Eyre Peninsula enjoyed good rains too this year, beginning way back almost 12 months ago. So that played a big part in it as well. But I think farmers are better able now to make good use of available moisture. And at the same time, I've seen farmers take an active role in preserving their native vegetation. Creek lines have been fenced off, sand dunes have been fenced off, revegetated, all that sort of thing. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and when it comes to, that erosion that potentially happens, we saw those storms at the start of last year did a lot of damage. Is that one of the topics the Landscape Board's working on in terms of potentially, increasing the vegetation and other coverage so we see less erosion in future? Yeah,
look, it's a difficult one because that was, and I'm going to use the word, it was an unprecedented event, certainly in the history of European settlement, and particularly in the northeast of the Eyre Peninsula, there were colossal rains over a very short period of time, flooding rains, and that does damage to the landscape. I mean, water's one of the great eroding forces right around the planet, and we're seeing a lot of flooding going on. So I guess for farmers, it's about understanding their watercourses and ensuring they have good ground cover. That only goes up to a point, I guess.
Yeah, there's only so much, I guess, you can stop nature, which has probably been a reinforcing point on the other hat, amongst others you've been wearing on the farm when it comes to selecting a site for desalination for the Eyre Peninsula. I guess doing our best to stave off what nature might refuse to provide us in terms of rainfall. How have we landed in terms of where we might actually be putting desalination in for the EP?
So this is a topic that's been under discussion for a long time, nearly 20 years, as long as I've been involved with public life. And about 12 months ago, the then Minister, or a little over, the then Minister for Environment, David Spears, established a committee of local representatives, interested parties, relevant parties, and asked me to chair that as I was an outgoing MP. and we were charged with finding a suitable site for a desalination plant on the Eyre Peninsula. After much consideration, a lot of due diligence, the site we preferred and proposed to both government and SA Water was a site at Sleaford West. So people have to keep in mind that this is only a relatively small desalination plant. It's just 5.3 gigalitres, which is proposed. And to put that in perspective, the Adelaide desal plant is 100 gigalitres. So it's just 1/20th of the size of that. And the idea really is to supplement the existing supply. Having said that, the existing supply is under pressure. Most of it comes from what we call the southern basins, or the Yulee-Wanilla Basin, southwest of Port Lincoln. And the extraction rates and the lack of recharge over recent years has seen that resource decline to a point where we're really concerned about the long-term sustainability of that. So a desalination plant would supplement that. It would be plumbed in at the southern end of the Eyre Peninsula network and distributed throughout the existing network to SA Water customers.
Has there been a consideration during all of that about what other desal has been or might be put on in future in other parts of the peninsula, or indeed into the west coast, or extending the network from that desal out that way?
Yeah, so there are always ongoing conversations, and I remember a few years ago the District Council of Ceduna were toying or looking into the opportunity to put a small desal plant out at Ceduna. My understanding is there's still talk about that. I don't have an issue with that, really. I think there is an opportunity for very small localised plants to put water into our small coastal communities, some of which don't have a reticulated supply, and Elliston comes to mind. So maybe that's an opportunity. But, of course, they are expensive to build. And we've seen now, just in the last 12 or 18 months, the cost of installing new pipe to transfer water. So this is the 600 mil pipe, the big main line. That's sitting at around $3.2 million a kilometre at the moment. So you can see, you only need to go 10 Ks, for example, and you're up over $30 million. So it's an expensive undertaking. It's expensive water, but sometimes it's the only option we have.
Yeah, one wonders how Tom Playford got it all done all those years ago. Suddenly it's so much more expensive. Yeah,
and I think there's a lot more demand too, of course. Of the Eyre Peninsula, what the locals know as the Todd system that was installed nearly 100 years ago now, and it was quite a feat of engineering. It was a reservoir dug in the Copio Hills just north of Port Lincoln. Water was pumped to the top of the nearest hill, and it reticulated through the pipe system as far as Ceduna. I understand it was the longest reticulated gravity-fed. It was gravity-fed system in the world at the time, so quite an engineering feat. And that same system is being used now to distribute the water, bar the Todd Reservoir, which was taken offline 20 years ago due to salinity and lack of inflow, I guess.
All right, well, Peter, it's good to have your voice back with us on the radio again, and your new role as the presiding member of the Landscape Board on the Eyre Peninsula. Appreciate seeing what comes out of the board and indeed the site selection for desal going forward. Thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Thanks, Rick. Nice to talk.